Hey everyone, Rob Ryder here, Thursday, February 9th, 2012. Um, if you've been following along, I've been going through various chapters of Blackstone's and spent the last couple days going through this particular chapter, Book 3, Chapter 4, Public Courts of Common Law and Equity. I've probably read it 4 times now, and now I'm doing a video on it. So, if you don't understand this stuff right off the bat, you're gonna have to read it 3, 4, 5 times. Watch this, whatever it takes, you know, to come to your own understanding. Um, in my opinion, what I'm gonna give you now is the dagger, the stake in the heart of the vampire, the bloodsucker. And so I ask that you please take notes, listen very intently. Don't listen to it once and call me asking me questions. Ponder it, and then we can talk about it. I got like 38 pages of shit on here and then some definition pages. This is going to take a while. It's going to take more than 1 hour for sure because I'm going to go slow. Hell, it might take 3 hours. I don't know. I'm going to do it one time, try to do it right, explain it as best I can. So, here we go. We are next to consider the several species and distinctions of courts of justice, which are acknowledged and used in the kingdom. All right, these are the ones they're using. These are either such as are of public and general jurisdiction throughout the whole realm. That's kind of what we're going to be talking about, or are only private special jurisdiction in some particular parts of it. So of the former, the general jurisdiction, we have universally established courts of equity, common law and equity, semicolon, the ecclesiastic courts, military courts, courts maritime. So those are the public, acknowledge the public ones, if I'm reading this right. Or the only one that's universally established is the common law and equity. And all the rest, the ecclesiastic, the courts military, courts maritime, are private. Let's find out. And first of such public courts are the courts of common law of equity. The policy of our ancient constitution, as regulated and established by great Alfred, was to bring justice home to every man's door by constituting a manner of courts of jurisdiction, as many courts of jurisdiction as there are manors and townships in the kingdom. So we got manors and townships that make up a kingdom. A kingdom is a certain size, it has a certain number of manors. Manors must have a certain number of townships, or vice versa. Where an injury were redressed in an easy and expeditious manner by the suffrage of neighbors and friends. These little courts, however, communicated with others of larger jurisdiction and those with others of still greater power, ascending gradually from the lowest to the supreme courts, which were respectively constituted to correct sorry about that phone ring. To correct the errors of the inferior ones and to determine such matters by reasons of their weight and difficulty demanded a more solemn discussion. The courts of justice, flowing in large streams from the king as the fountains to his superior courts of record, and then divided into smaller channels till the whole and every part of the kingdom was plentifully watered and refreshed. Go figure. That's how we're going to water and refresh the kingdom. Okay. An institution that seems highly agreeable to the dictates of natural reason, as well as more enlightened policy, being equally similar to that which prevailed in Mexico and Peru, and before they were discovered by the Spaniards, and that which was established in Jewish Republic by Moses. So imagine. What Moses established was the same or similar to what was found in Mexico and Peru, which is the same or similar to what is found in common law of England. So in Mexico, each town and province had its proper judges who heard and decided causes, except when the point of litigation was too intricate for their determination, and then it was remitted to the supreme courts of the empire, established in the capital and consisting of 12 judges. Wow, look at that. They had a jury of 12. And in a court of law, the jury is the tribunal. Peru, according to somebody, was divided into small districts containing 10 families, each all registered under one magistrate who had authority to decide little differences and punish petty crimes. 5 of those composed a higher class of 50, and 2 of these last composed another called 100. 10 hundreds constituted the largest division, consisting of 1,000 families, and each division had a separate judge or magistrate with a proper degree of subordination. In like manner, we read of Moses that, finding the sole administration of justice too heavy for him, he chose able-bodied men out of all Israel, such as feared God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10, and then judged the people at all seasons. And they judged the people at all seasons. The hard causes they brought onto Moses, but every smaller matter they judged themselves. So, these inferior courts, at least the name and form of them, still continue in our legal constitution. But as the superior courts of record have in practice obtained a concurrent original jurisdiction with these, so the superior courts have a original and concurrent jurisdiction with all the inferior courts. And there is besides a power of removing plaints. Plaint is what they do when they don't have a writ, original writ, under the Great Seal of Chancery. That's called a plaint. So, and there is besides a power of removing writs or actions thither from all inferior jurisdictions. Upon these accounts, among others, it has happened, and these petty tribunals have fallen into decay and almost into oblivion. Whether for better or for worse may be a matter of some speculation when we consider, on one hand, the increase of expense and delay, and on the other, the more upright and impartial decisions that followed from this change of jurisdiction. So I think what he's saying is we're gonna see some small courts that don't really get used anymore, although they exist. Everything is happening in the superior courts. The Court of Common Pleas is one of the superior courts. There's a reason for that for them to do, but there's remedy in it for us. But let's just go through the courts and we'll just keep reading, see where we end up. So the order I shall observe in discoursing on these several courts, constituted for the redress of civil injuries, for which those of a jurisdiction merely criminal, I shall not at present concern myself. So we're not going to worry about criminal jurisdiction yet. This is just all civil. Everything we deal with is civil anyways. Will be by beginning with the lowest, and those whose jurisdiction, though public and generally dispersed throughout the kingdom, is yet, with regard to each particular court, confined to very narrow limits, and now ascending gradually to those of the next extensive and transcendent power. So we're going back up the stream to the most powerful. That's the idea. Start the tributary and find the main channel, and let's go explore. The lowest, and at the same time the most expeditious court of justice known to law of England, is the Court of Peteroo, Dusty Foot Court. So-called dusty feet of the suitors, according to Sir Edward Coke, because the justice is done speedily as dust fall from their boot. I don't know if they mean traffic court or small claims. I don't know. You know, I'm trying to figure out what that might be in today, so I'm going to say it's traffic court or small claims. Question mark. Upon the same principle that justice among Jews was administered in the gate of a city, that the proceedings might be more speedily and well as public. But the etymology given us by learned modern writers is more ingenious and satisfactory, it being derived, according to him, from something, a peddler in Old French, and therefore signifying the court of such petty dealer-seller as resort to fairs or markets. So a pie powder court was held in front of a mayor or bailiff of the borough. It is a court of record incident to every fair and market, of which the steward of him who owns or has the toll of the market is the judge. So, to me it sounds like traffic court. It was instituted to administer justice for all injuries done in that very fair or market, and not any preceding one, so that the injury must be done, complained of, heard, and determined within the compass of one and the same day. The court was cognizant of all matters that can possibly arise within the precinct of the fair or market, and the plaintiff must make oath that the cause of action arose there. So I think this is when they're writing you a traffic ticket. You're in court on the side of the road, and that guy is the steward, or who owns or has toll of the market is the judge. But he has his guys out there. It's like each one of them have their own separate little business, and that's what we think they have. From this court, a writ of error lies in the nature of an appeal to the courts of Westminster, and that's the Court of Chancery, as we'll see. The reason of its institution seems to have been to do justice expeditiously among a variety of persons that resort from distant places to a fair or market, since it is probable that no other inferior court might be able to serve its process or execute its judgment on both or perhaps either of the parties. And therefore, unless this court had been erected, the complaint must necessarily have resorted, even in the first instance, to some superior jurisdiction. Judicature. Yeah, so if we hadn't set this up, it had to go into a superior court. They wouldn't make any money. Let's set up a smaller one. The court baron is a court incident. So this is the second one now. So there's a thing called the court baron. Is a court incident to every manor in the kingdom, and was held by the steward within the said manor. The court baron is of two natures. One is a customary court, of which we formerly spoke, appertaining entirely to the copy holders. And we're going to go look at a definition for that in a second, in which their estates are transferred by surrender and admittance, and other matters transacted relative to tenures only. So we got some interesting definitions here. What's a copyhold? At its origin in medieval England, copyhold tenure was a tenure of lands according to the custom of the manor, the title deeds being a copy of the record of the manorial court. Well, I have a copy of a record. It's called a certified copy of record of birth. I think that's my title deed. And since I haven't claimed it, there's another copy, that there's actually two copies of this, and somebody else is claiming it as abandoned property, or however they think they can claim it. The privilege is granted to each tenant, and the exact services he was to render to the lord of the manor in return for them were described in a book kept by the steward, who gave a copy of the same to the tenant. So this is where that agreement that runs with the land is going on. Right? We gave them a copy hold, a title deed on our estate. Consequently, these tenants were afterwards called copy holders in contrast to freeholders. All right, so we got two different things. We got copy holders and freeholders. Well, what's a copy holder? Well, there are two main kinds. Copy hold of inheritance, with one main tenant landlord who paid rent and undertook duties to the lord. So we gave them a copy hold of inheritance. When they died, the holding nominally passed to their next heir, who might be the eldest son, daughter, or youngest son, daughter, or division between children, depending on custom of the particular manor. During their life, the tenant could usually sell the holding to another person by formally surrendering it to the lord to be regranted to them. This was recorded in the court roll and formed the new copyhold for the purchaser. So I think what happens is that these are the things that last for 20 years, and we gave the first one as an infant, which allowed the second one to come up, because during the life the tenant could usually sell the holding to another person by formally surrendering it to the Lord. So they're going to surrender it to us, and we're going to re-grant it to somebody else. Okay? But this is the kind of lease that we gave them, and they owe us rent. There's also another kind called copyholds for lives. 3 named persons were nominated. Sounds like a trust to me. The first name was the holder tenant, who held for the duration of their life. So the holder tenant is this copyhold of inheritance gentleman above that we gave it to. Now he's going to do something with it. The other 2 were said to be in reversion or remainder, and effectively formed a queue. When the first life died, the second named inherited the property and nominated a third life for the end of the new queue. So then they're going to nominate somebody else. So they're going to make another trust. So it's a trust in a trust. These were recorded in the Court of Rolls as copyholds. So these were recorded in the court rolls as copyhold for this type of tenant. So the word copyhold means something. We may be asking people about the copyholds. It was not usually possible for these holdings to be sold, as there were 3 lives with an entitlement. Copyhold of lives is therefore regarded as less secure tenancy than copyhold of inheritance. Okay. So to me, this is Sesta KV Trust, this copyhold for lives. It's based on use. Back to our story. Okay. Where did we? Okay, so we ended up here at appertaining entirely to copyholders. So the copyholders are the ones that have the grant by inheritance, or the copyhold by inheritance, or the copyhold by lives. It didn't say which one. But in which their estates are transferred or surrendered by surrender and admittance, and other matters transacted relative to their tenures only. So there's 2 different kinds, so they're going to have 2 different actions depending on which type of copyhold they have. The other which we now speak is a court of common law. It is a court of the barons, by which name the freeholders were sometimes anciently called. So the freeholders were called barons. For that it is held before freeholders who owe suit and service to the manor, the steward being rather the register than the judge. Okay, so the other which you speak is according to common law. So this court, baron court, has 2 natures. One's the customary court, and the other one's the common law court. You're going to find that many of these courts are they have 2 hats. They have the one in civil law or their society, and then they have the one for common law. This one on top is when you're working in their society. It's a customary court. This one below is common law. It's when you're working in law. And people change positions. So the steward being rather the register than the judge, where up here the steward is the judge, I believe is what they're saying. On the customary court, the steward's the judge. The court baron was held by the steward within the same manner. So he was sitting as judge. The steward was. Down here, he's the register rather than the judge, the registrar. And what is a manor? By English law, a manor is a tract of land originally granted by the king to a person of rank, part of which was given to the grantee to his followers. Okay, so that's what a manor is. But what's a freehold? Let's see who a freeholder is. A freeholder can refer to one who is in freehold, one who holds title to real property in fee simple, an official of a county government in the U.S. state of New Jersey or any other state, a proprietor who holds a piece of land outright and has the right to lease, rent, or sell as he pleases. So this freeholder, to me, is the copyholder of inheritance, because he has the right to lease, to rent, or sell as he pleases. So the freeholders are the ones that we gave the copyhold of inheritance. They owe us rent. Okay, but it says they have a fee simple. Well, let's look at fee simple. In English law, fee simple, even fee simple absolute, is an estate of land, a form of freehold ownership. It is the way that real estate is owned in common law countries and is the highest ownership interest possibly can be had in real property. All right. It is the way that real estate is owned in common law countries. All right, so it's the way you can own it in common law countries. Allodial is reserved to governments under a civil structure. Allodial is reserved to governments under a civil structure. Fee simple ownership represents ownership interest in real property, but it is limited by government powers of taxation, eminent domain, police power, escheat, and could also be limited further by certain encumbrances or conditions in the deed. How fee simple ownership interest is limited by these government powers often involves a shift of allodial title to fee simple. So I'm thinking that since we're a sovereign nation state, allodial title is reserved to governments. They're talking about you as a living man being a sovereign nation state by definition of the law of nations. But because of what they've done, we don't have allodial title. Now the best we can have is fee simple. How fee simple ownership interest is limited by these government powers often involves a shift of allodial title to a fee simple, such as one uniting with other property owners, ascending to zoning restrictions and municipal regulations. So when you've taken, as a king, you have allodial title. When you take an oath to the Constitution and you're allowed to become a freeholder, you are uniting with other property owners, acceding to zoning restrictions and or municipal regulations. So they took an oath to the Constitution. That's the municipal regulation. I think that's who the freeholders are. These courts, though, in their nature distinct, are frequently confounded together. The court we are now considering, the freeholders' court, was composed of the lord tenants, who were the peers of each other, and were bound by their feudal tenure to assist the lord in the dispersion of domestic justice. So when they say feudal tenure, I think they mean like knights' service, right? These are officers. Well, what's an officer? They're in the military. So that's the feudal tenure. The ones who are officers are the copyholders of inheritance. Makes them the freeholders. This was formerly held every 3 weeks, and its most important business is to determine by writ of right all controversies relating to the right of land within the manor. It may also hold plea of any personal action or debt or trespass of the like, where the debt or damages do not amount to 40 shillings. It's got two things, right? It can hold a plea in personal actions of debt, trespass, or the like, where the damages do not amount to 40 shillings. Trespass, it doesn't amount to 40 shillings. But it has a bigger one, which is all controversies relating to the right of lands within the manor. So that's its common law side, and then the debt and damages is the civil side, which is the same sum or 3 marks that bounded the jurisdiction of the ancient Gothic courts in their lowest instance. So called because 4 were instituted within every superior district or 100. But the proceedings on a writ of right may be removed into the county court by precept for the sheriff, from the sheriff, called a tolls. A precept is a commandment, instruction, or other order, authoritative rule of action. So it needs to be we command, that type of stuff. Because it removes the cause, because it removes the cause from the court baron. All right, so that is how you would. But the proceedings with a writ of right, you may remove it into the county court by precept from the sheriff. So you need to get the sheriff to make a commandment, because the county court's the sheriff's court. We're going to find out, I believe. And the proceedings in all other actions may be removed into the superior courts by the king's writ of pone, or come to court, which is an original writ issued on chancery according to the nature of the suit. So there's 2 ways it can be removed to a superior court. Writs of pone, and pone is original writ, now superseded by the writ of certoria, for removing cases from an inferior court into the court of exchequer. So if you want to move it from an inferior court into the court of exchequer, from this baron's court, it's by a writ of pone. The other way is with an original writ sued out of chancery. According to the nature of the suit. After judgment given, a writ of false judgment lies to the court of Westminster, to Chancery Court, to hear and review the cause, and not a writ of error, for this is not a court of record. All right, so what's he saying here? So if you're in this court and you're going to appeal, because this would be after judgment, a writ of false judgment goes to the Chancery Court. So when you go to the Chancery Court, I believe what they're saying is you're going to get a writ of false judgment under the Great Seal of Chancery. Okay. To hear and review the cause, and not a writ of error, for this is not a court of record. It's a court of common law, but it's not a court of record. And therefore, in all these writs of removal, the first direction given is to cause the plaint to be recorded. Okay? So the first direction given in the writs that they're talking about here, the writs of pone, the writs of pone, or the writ of false judgment, the very first thing, the first direction given is to cause the plaintiff to go on the record. Plaint is a complaint other than original writ under Great Seal. That was from another section we've done before. Complaint, the presentation by plaintiff in his civil action into common pleas. So where do we use complaint? I usually do this because the word is above. Where is complaint? No, it's just above. Plaint is a complaint. A complaint is a presentation by a plaintiff in a civil action. So it's not criminal. If they're called a plaintiff, by definition, it's not criminal. And okay, and a pone is an original writ from an inferior court for removing a case from an inferior court into a court of exchequer. And you're going to get that by the king's writs of pone. So I think that this is where you would be a plea of the crown to get a writ. or you need to go to the Chancery Court, one or the other, and they're going to be in the same building. Anyways, when you get in depot into the Court of Exchequer, you're going in equity. In a hundred court, there's only a larger court baron being held for all the inhabitants of a particular hundred instead of a manor. The suitors here are also judges and the steward, the registrar. The free suitors, I didn't look up free suitors, here are also judges and the steward, the registrar. And that happened up here someplace where they said this. Where in the hell is it? And this is how this goes. Back and forth, back and forth. The steward, being rather the register, is when they're in common law. So, let's go down here. And the steward, the register. So this is a common law. As in the case of the court baron, it is likewise no court of record, resembling the former in all points except in point of territory. It is of greater jurisdiction. I think this is the state courts, district courts, and so forth. This is said by Sir Edwin Coke to have been derived out of the county court for the case of the people. So we have the county court, which is the sheriff, and then largers of the county, 100 counties thereabouts, would make up the state courts. This is said by Sir Edwin Coke to have been derived out of the county court for the case of the people, that they might have justice done to them at their own doors without any charge or loss of time. But its institution was probably coeval with the hundreds themselves, which were formerly observed to have been introduced, though not invented by Alfred, being derived from the polity of the ancient Germans. The hundreds, we may remember, were principal inhabitants of the district, composed of different villages, originally a number of 100, but afterwards only called by the name. Probably gave the same denomination of the district of which it was chosen, and who probably gave it the same denomination of the district. So this is a district court. Caesar speaks positively of judicial power excised in the hundreds court and courts baron, which we fairly construe the lords of a hundreds of the manors, declare the law among dependents and abate the controversies. Declare the law among dependents. That's what they're doing. Why did this thing get all freaking out of whack? And Tacitus, who had examined their constitution till more alternatively informs us not only of the authority of the lords, but of that of the hundreds, or jury, who were taken out of the common freeholders and had themselves a share in the determination. So these grand juries, in my opinion, they send you to where you think you're going to a grand jury, these are people of the freehold. They're specially selected. They've been given a freehold. So they have a form of inheritance, or they have what they have is a lease from you. And but that makes them freeholders, owners of land. They have to be alive to do this. So I think these are the people that make up, what we call the electors, like for the Electoral College and so forth. That there are people who are considered alive, right? That's why the Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, Attorney General all have to expatriate as citizens because they need to be alive to deal with these people, the copy holders or the freeholders. And why these grand juries never change. The same people sit on them, apparently. Or at least the foreman never seems to change. This hundred court was denominated in Gothic Constitution, but this court, as causes are equally liable to be removed from hence and from common court baron, And by the same writs, it may also be reviewed by writ of false judgment, and therefore fall into equal disuse with regard to trial of actions. So they don't use it to try actions. It doesn't mean they don't use it for something else, but they're not trying actions. So the next one, the county court, is the court incident to the jurisdiction of the sheriff. It is not a court of record, but may hold pleas of debt or damages under the value of 40 shillings. So if somebody has a plea or for a debt or damages under 40 shillings, they're supposed to take it to this court, over some of which causes these inferior courts have, but the express words of the statute, jurisdiction totally exclusive of the King's Superior Court. The cases they bring into civil courts, so the cases they bring into civil courts against us now in these superior courts really should have been held here if they had a value less than 40 shillings. So, but for an order to be entitled to sue an action of trespass for goods before the king's justices, see, trespass is common law, and that would be before the king's bench, because trespass is criminal. The plaintiff is directed to make an affidavit that the cause of action does really, in bona fide good faith, amount to 40 shillings, which affidavit is unaccountably disused, except in the court of exchequer. So I think they're saying that they're not using it now because they don't take anything to the county court, right? But they're taking it to the higher court, the superior courts, for civil actions. And when they do that for a trespass, which is the common law thing they're going to get, they're going to get you for this open-ended trespass you really haven't committed. And they're going to say that you've harmed them for an amount of 40 shillings, and it needs to be on an affidavit. If it isn't there, there's an error. Writ of error time into the king's bench. And then we had another statute which gave the judges in all personal actions where the jury assesses damages less than 40 shillings a power to certify the same and abridge and deprive the plaintiff of his full cost. So if we find out that they haven't done this, then it's less than 40 shillings. And now the judge can deprive the plaintiff of his full cost. It was also meant to prevent vexation litigation by litigious plaintiffs, who for purposes of mere oppression might be inclinable to institute suits in the superior courts for injuries of trifling value. It's all they've done to us, man. They're coming with a case that has nothing and getting us to agree to a statute merchant bond while we're there. Because once this trespass is open, it allows them to bring any other suit, private suit they might have, at the same time. So they're going to get you to try to plead guilty or not guilty. That's your plea. How do you plead? Guilty or not guilty? Well, please go to the Crown. Right? Well, no, I'm going to enter a plea of the Crown. I demand to see that the affidavit from the exchequer says there should be one for this case. So the county court may also hold plea on many real actions and of personal actions to any amount by virtue of a special writ called a justices, which is a writ empowering the sheriff to, for the sake of dispatch, to do the same justice in his county court as might otherwise be had at Westminster. Okay, so let's think about this. The county court may also hold plea of many real actions and of all personal actions to any amount by virtue of a special writ called a justices, which is a writ empowering the sheriff to take same dispatch to do the same justice in his court as might have otherwise been had at Westminster. Well, to have it at Westminster, you had to have an original writ sued out from Chancery. So the county court has jurisdiction of cases where damages are claimed only to a certain amount, but sometimes suits were brought there when a greater damages were claimed. In such cases, an original writ by this name issues out of chancery in order to give the court jurisdiction. So again, there has to be an original writ out of chancery. And what is a justices? Justices, the name of a writ which acquires the name from mandatory words which it contains that you do A.B. justice, that you do somebody justice, are those words on the writ. The county court has jurisdiction in cases where damages are claimed only to a certain amount, less than 40 shillings. But sometimes suits are brought there when greater damages are claimed, such as cases an original writ by this name issues out of chancery in order to give the court jurisdiction. Got to have a damn original writ out of chancery under the Great Seal. So the freeholders of the county, now again, these are the officers who hold office, are the real judges in this court because they make up a jury. And, you know, the jury are the judges. The guy that's sitting up there is just a magistrate in a court of record, court of law. And the sheriff is the ministerial officer. The great conflux. So he's the sheriff is the one who's sitting as the judge, but he's there merely as a ministerial officer, as a magistrate. And it's the jury that's making the decision. He's just going to administer it. The great conflux of freeholders, which are supposed to always attend to the county court, which is a justice court for the people and theater of the county's power. It's theater, folks. Is a reason why all acts of parliament at the end of every session were wont to be published by the sheriff, why all outlawries of absconding offenders are there proclaimed, and why all popular elections which the freeholders are to make are as formerly of sheriffs and conservators of the peace, and still coroners, vendors, and the knights of the shire, must be made or in full county court. So all you people think you're voting for anybody, you're not. It's all done by the freeholders. They're deciding who gets these offices. Interesting, isn't it? No county court should be adjourned longer than 1 month, consisting of 28 days, and this was also the ancient usage as appears from the laws of King Edward the Elder, that is, the sheriff. Let the sheriff hold a full assembly of the people about once a month, declare the law to everyone, and severely determine suits. In those times the county court was a court of great dignity and splendor. The bishop and alderman, the earl, were the principal men of the shire, sitting therein to administer justice, both in lay and ecclesiastic causes. But its dignity was much impaired when the bishop was prohibited and the earl neglected to attend it. And in modern times, as proceedings are removable from hence into the king's bench, proceedings are removable from hence the king's superior courts by writ of prone or recorder, in the same manner as the same manner as was done before. You could do the same here, and the same writs of false judgment, and in the nature of writ or error, this was occasioned the disuse of bringing action. So again, they bringing actions to this one because you had all these writs you could use to move it to the king's bench. So they figured, well, take it to the king's bench to start with. These are the several species of common law courts, which, though dispersed universally throughout the realm, are nevertheless partial jurisdiction and confined to particular districts, yet communicating with, and as it were, members of the superior courts of the more extended and general nature, which are calculated for the administration of redress not in any one lordship, hundred, or county, but throughout the whole kingdom at large. So those are the inferiors. Now we're going to look at we'll call it the major courts. So the first one is the Court of Common Pleas, or what is frequently termed in law the Court of the Common Bench. The Court of Common Bench. By special action by the ancient Saxon Constitution, there was only one superior court of justice in the kingdom, and that had cognizance both of civil and spiritual causes. The General Council, which assembled annually or oftener wherever the king kept his Easter, Christmas, or Whitsuntide, as well to do private justice as to consult upon public business. Okay? At the conquest, the ecclesiastic jurisdiction was diverted into another channel, and the conqueror, fearing damage from these annual parliaments, contrived also to separate their ministerial power as judges from their deliberative as counselors of the crown. Okay, fearing danger of these annual parliaments, contrived also to separate their ministerial. So I think that they're doing is they're talking about at the conquest, the ecclesiastic jurisdiction was diverted into another channel. And I think that is the Court of Chancery, I'm going to say. And the conqueror, fearing damage from these annual parliaments, contrived also to separate their ministerial power as the judges from their deliberatives as counselors to the crown. So they had two different powers. One is as a minister power as a judge, and the other one as a counselor to the crown. He therefore established a constant court in his own shall, thence called by Bracton and other ancient authors, the King's Bench. This court was composed of the king's great officers of the state resident in his palace, and usually attended of his person, which is the Lord High Constable. So the court was composed of the king's great officers of the state resident in his palace, and usually attended on his person. So here's the people that were in the king's part of the King's Bench: the Lord High Constable, the Lord Marshal, who chiefly presided in matters of honor, determining according to military and laws of nations. Besides these, there were the Lord High Steward, the Lord Great Chamberlain, the Steward of the Household, the Lord Chancellor, whose peculiar business it was to keep the king's seal and examine all such writs, grants, letters that were to pass under the authority of the Lord, under that authority, and the Lord High Treasurer, who was the principal advisor in matters relating to revenue. These high officers were assisted by certain persons learned in the laws, who were called the king's justiciars or justices, and by the greater barons of Parliament, all of whom had a seat at the King's Bench. I think this was and formed a kind of court of appeal, or rather of advice, in matters of great moment and difficulty. All these and their several departments transacted all secular business, both criminal, King's Bench, civil, common pleas, and otherwise of matters of revenue, and likewise of matters of equity in the exchequer. And over all presides one special magistrate called the Chief Justiciar, and he was the Chief Justice of all England, who was the principal minister of state, the second man in the kingdom, by virtue of his office, guardian of the realm in the king's absence. Powerful man, he may not want you around if you're the king. And this officer, it was who principally determined all the vast variety of causes that arose in this extensive jurisdiction, and for the plenitude of his power grew at length both obnoxious to the people and dangerous to the government which he employed him. So the dude had too much power. This great universal court being founded to follow the king's household in all his progress and expeditions, that the trial of common causes were there and was found very burdensome to the subject. So this court is supposed to follow the king wherever the king goes. If the king went on the crusade, who's going to handle the business back at home? Because for common causes, how are you going to catch up to him? So King John, who dreaded the power of the justiciar, very readily consented to the article which now forms the 11th chapter of the Magna Carta, and acts, "Let not the common pleas follow the king's court, but be held in some fixed place." Okay, so it doesn't follow the king's court. It's going to be held in one place. And in Koch's Institutus Law, Book 2, it goes through the Magna Carta, and in this chapter 11, it talks about the Court of Common Pleas. But one of the things it says is that pleas of the crown are either criminal or mortal, and they go to the king's bench. And then anything else goes to the Court of Common Pleas. This certain place was established in Westminster Hall, the place where the court originally sat when the king resided in that city, and there has ever since continued. And the court being thus rendered fixed and stationary, the judges became so too, and chief with other justices of the common pleas are therefore appointed, with jurisdiction to hear and determine all pleas of land and injuries merely civil between subject and subject. Again, it has two uses. If it has to do with land, it has to do with common law. And then if it's merely civil, that's the stuff we're dealing with today. Which to bring here, by the way, by this point, has to have an affidavit saying it was 40 shillings. Which critical establishment of this principal court of common law at the particular juncture and at that particular place gave rise to the inns of courts in the neighborhood, and thereby collecting together the whole body of the common lawyers. Now these inns of courts still exist. You probably have one if you're, well, I know you have in your state. Just put in inns of courts in your state and you'll find them. Enable the law itself to withstand the attacks of canonists and civilians who labor to extirpate and destroy it. So that's where the sergeants at law and so forth are supposed to hang out. The ones who know what the law is. Again, they wear two hats. It could be an attorney and a counselor at law. I think if you go to them as a counselor at law in a lawful manner to say you want to enter a plea of the crown for whatever it is, you believe that fraud's happened in this case, would you please investigate? That they would. By the same token, I just think we already have an attorney that's been hired for the people. That's the prosecutor. He's the king's attorney general. Okay, look at this is. I'm going to stop here. We're going to pick up on this page on the next one. I was 12, so it might take 3 hours to do this, but let's stop this one and then we'll move on. See you guys in a bit. This is part 1.